All right, good morning, Chair Postman, Member Vollandroff, and staff and guests. The lobby is open and recording has begun.
Good morning. Thank you, Dustin. Good morning, everybody. Member Garrett is in transit today. We will convene the board caucus meeting for Tuesday, May 31st, 2022. We have one item and an interesting one on our agenda today. We're going to have a discussion about the Healthy Youth Survey, and particularly how it relates to those issues that we all keep an eye on. And we're joined by the LCB's Public Health and Education Liaison, Mary Sagawa, and with her is Tyler Watson from Healthcare Authority, one of the partners in the Healthy Youth Survey. He's the HCA's Prevention Research and Evaluation Manager. Thanks for joining us, Tyler. And I'll just turn it over to you, Mary, and tell us what you learned this year.
All right. Thank you so much, Chair Postman, and good morning to you and Board Member Vollandroff. We appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today and share this information. As you know, the Healthy Youth Survey has been going on for a long time, and we want to share the latest results. There are some caveats with that, with 2021, but I want to start by turning it over to Tyler and having him kick us off with some background information about the Healthy Youth Survey and start to share the results. And we'll do a little bit of tag teaming here. I just want to say in advance that I really appreciate Tyler's willingness to be with us today and joining this. He's one of the key evaluation people who really studies the data carefully. And so it's great that Healthcare Authority and Tyler in particular agreed to join us today. So with that, go ahead, Tyler.
Thanks, Mary, and thanks all for having me join your meeting today and the opportunity to present. Can I just get a confirmation that folks can hear me and see the screen I'm sharing with the PowerPoint?
You bet. Yep. Good.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay, so like Mary said, thanks for that intro, Mary. We'll be sharing some of our results and insights from our latest survey, which happened last fall in 2021. Sure I can advance. I'll start with just a little bit of background about this project and what it is and how that relates to topics that are relevant to today. This is very much a statewide effort. So along with Healthcare Authority, where I work, and LCB, we also partner with OSPI and the Department of Health. So we very much a collaborative effort to administer this survey. We work also closely with schools. That's where the survey is administered through our public school system, mostly. There's a few exceptions to that. As well as ESDs, local health jurisdictions, community prevention providers, all help with the administration, as well as getting the results out and getting the word out. And the funding for this project is from the dedicated cannabis account, dedicated marijuana account, and the substance abuse block grant. That's how we fund this survey that happens every other year. So just a few considerations. This project is reviewed by the Washington State Institutional Review Board. It's surveillance. It's seeing what's happening with adolescents around the state. It is also research. So different researchers can get the data set and do their own analyses as well. A lot of consideration and care goes into this survey. Parent notifications are sent out ahead of time. Who we call survey coordinators, kind of a designated point person in the schools, gets a whole packet of training materials. Students are supposed to watch a video now that the survey is online about the survey, why they're taking it, and it's anonymous and voluntary. So students can opt out at any time. They don't have to take the survey. They don't have to finish the survey. They don't have to answer all the questions on the survey. and their information is never shared. When we get down to the school level, many results, if there's not enough students, the results are suppressed to protect that anonymity. And finally, we do quality control checks on the back end to check for honesty, essentially. So we can tell if a student just went through and clicked every single, option C. Those get tossed out because they probably didn't answer honesty. We also ask them at the end of the survey, did you answer this honestly? So we have a bunch of checks to try and make sure that we're getting good results. So that's a little bit about how this is administered. In 2021, we had over 200,000 students take this survey from all 39 counties across the state. So this is by far the largest effort that I'm aware of to get information about adolescent health behaviors, not just in Washington, but actually in any state. I don't think anyone has a sample quite this large. That's over 200 school districts, almost 900 schools. And then we do have some exceptions that I mentioned that are not kind of the public school district, where we have a few charter schools. We had a tribal school take the survey, School for the Blind, and 3 private schools. So it's mostly by default open to public schools, but other schools can participate if they ask. And what else? And again, no one is required to take this. This is we do this. Every school that does take it gets their own report. But this is, again, participation is voluntary. So we were happy with the participation in 2021 because, as we'll talk about in just a second.
Can I ask you? I'm sorry. Would you prefer we hold questions to the end, or do you mind taking questions along the way?
I don't mind taking questions. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, we can take questions along the way. That's fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I was just looking at the number of students, 206,000 in the 2021, and thinking about the impacts of COVID. And it sounds like maybe there were some changes to, during COVID. And I'm just wondering about the participation rate from the previous Healthy Youth Survey versus 2021. And did we actually see an increase or a decrease, or what were the participation rates during the time of COVID for the survey?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have a slide on exactly how 2021 is different, but to briefly answer your question, participation did decrease, but not by a lot. I think we were concerned that, schools are really busy. When this happened in fall 2021, a lot of schools had just gotten back to fully in person or mostly in person instruction. So I think we were really worried that we were going to get a huge drop off. And I think ultimately it came down to, I think we got like maybe 10% less participation than in past years. So not too bad, not too bad. It's not, we'd like to see, of course, increased participation, but given everything that had happened, I think we were pretty happy with the sample we got. And it is the other thing I'll mention is it is because we have such a good sample, it is representative. We can say, these results, we do kind of a sampling, but we can say these results are representative of students across the state of Washington, at least students in public schools.
Great. I have one more follow-up question, then I'll hold my questions because it sounds like you may cover some things, but just since I've interrupted already, I might as well finish my line of questioning. And that is, of the 877 schools, can you remind me, I'm pretty familiar with the Healthy Youth Survey, but can you remind me, middle school, high school, both is the first question. And then part B is, how do schools opt in? And then of the 877, they've opted in. And then what are the number of schools? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, of the 877, how many schools didn't opt into the survey? And do you have any thoughts about why schools choose not to opt in?
Yes. Okay, so I'll answer the first part. So opting in of these number of, what was the first part? Sorry.
It was whether middle and high school. So
yeah.
Oh,
yes, yeah. Middle and high school.
Yeah, grades 6, 8, 10, and 12, primarily the respondents. We do let the other grades, kind of 7, 9, and 11, also answer if it's a small school and they want to make sure they have enough responses to not get suppressed results. So yes, that ends up including middle and high schools. and elementary schools actually, because of the sixth graders. And the sixth graders get a slightly different version because we acknowledge like it's not all of the questions are probably not appropriate for sixth graders. And then the second question of the 870 or 70 schools. So again, we've had closer to, I think, 1,000 schools in the past. So I can't, so yes, these 877 all opted in. No one has to take this. Schools that have opted out, I mean, or just not opted to take it, rather, they don't have to opt out. They just don't, ask for the survey. I think there's a lot of reasons. I think the pandemic was a huge one. I think there's students are over-surveyed. That's another reason. I think, unfortunately, it's hard to make sure that this doesn't, overlap with any other, either state or school or district assessments that students do nowadays. So I think that's also a thing. And then I think there's just a growing scrutiny of, data collection overall. So I think there's a lot of different reasons.
Great, thank you. I'll hold my questions to the end now.
All right, we'll keep moving. This is just really brief. I just wanted to, if anyone is interested in going and looking at more of the results than what we're presenting today, all of what I'm presenting today is going to be pulled from our website, askhys.net, in which you can navigate to, click on survey results, and you can look at any of this on your own time, go into more detail, look at other substances than we're talking about today. Any of that can be found on the website. So I'm not going to present anything that you can't go find on the website. And just as a brief, what you can find there is a few different things, just very briefly. There's fact sheets, which are kind of by topic. So you can look at the fact sheet on alcohol use, for example. Frequency reports are going to be kind of like just the numbers, like how many students responded yes to this question, both in number and percentage. If you really want to get into the details, you can go to our Q by Q analysis tool, which allows you to look at how many students who answered this question in this way also answered this question in this way. So it allows you to do a cross tabulation. And then finally, we do have some PowerPoints that are kind of pre-populated a little bit. So that can all be found online. And then what we're going to highlight today is some of the results that you can go find online. Okay, so here's my caveat slide, which we'll get to some of those other questions. 2021 was unique in several ways. So prior to this administration last fall, this survey was happening every 2 years on even years. So the last time was 2018. We were scheduled for 2020, but as you see in the next bullet point, we postponed 2020. There was no way. We were asked schools, and there was no way that they were going to administer what was then a paper and pencil survey during that first that fall start during the pandemic. So we postponed to 21. We also made it completely online. If there was a handful of schools who said we don't have the capacity to administer online, so we still allowed some paper pencils, but it's mainly an online survey now. And so here's the caveat here or disclaimer. Given the context of the pandemic and the fact that it was postponed, what that essentially did is kind of break our trend analysis. So we can no longer very directly compare 2021 to previous years because we have an additional year gap. Different students were answering because of that gap. Because it kind of threw off that pattern. And we know that a lot of different factors were different during the pandemic than they were in past years. So we're going to not rely too much on trends. We'll show one briefly, but have to be very careful when we compare, this was a drop or this was what happened in the 3 years since 2018. So that's the disclaimer. And so let's get into some of the results. So what we really saw across the board, for the most part, is that students reported low levels of substance use. Past 30 days use, very common way we ask this for alcohol, cigarettes, marijuana, painkiller, and polysubstance decreased. And so here's my, again, I'm not going to focus too much on trends, but a lot of these substances were decreasing, at least a little bit, but this was a much larger decrease than we had seen previous to 2021. For e-cigarette / vapor products, we also saw a pretty substantial decrease, and this reversed a previous trend. So prior to 2021, we had seen this was kind of the category that was increasing, right? We had the whole vaping epidemic happening, and that decreased. So that changed a trend. And then we did see that perception of regular use of alcohol or marijuana slightly increased as well during this usual administration. So I'm going to go into some more detail. Here's, again, this is the only trend line I think we're going to show, but here's how these four of these substances look over time. So we see that alcohol in the green, marijuana in the orange, cigarettes in the gray. We're already decreasing for the most part. Sorry. And they decreased much more. And then we saw e-cigarettes had been increasing, and then those took a substantial decrease as well. And again, I'm not drawing the line here because this is a break in the trend between these 3 years. The green and the orange, or the green and the blue, are the same dot here. The other thing I'll mention is we use grade 10 a lot. We use sophomores a lot because they tend to have a really, really good response rate. And these are students who, they're first into high school. They're no longer in junior high, but they're not quite to the end of high school in the 12th grade category. So for that and other reasons, we tend to look at 10th grade as like a really good kind of indicator grade. So you'll see things from grade 10 a lot, rather than combining all 6, 8, 10, and 12. Right. I think I am going to turn it over to Mary.
All right, great. Thank you, Tyler. So I'm going to start with some of the details of alcohol and cannabis use, and I'll go through these fairly quickly. But again, if you have questions, if you want to jump in, go ahead, or wait till the end, either way, but we'll run through these. So again, relying on that statement of Tyler's that we're careful about trends, this gives you the specific information on alcohol use and what that looked like between the data from 2018 and the data from 2021. So you can see the amount, how much lower it was. I wish we could ask why, ask these students what made the difference. We can make some guesses about social activities being curtailed and just a whole change in environment. But we have nothing that we can substantially, that we can actually say this is why it happened. I think as we continue in 2023 and 2025, we'll get a better idea of, are we really seeing a change here, or is this just an odd blip? We'd love for it to be a permanent change, but time will tell. Binge drinking, again, when we look at alcohol use, we tend to focus more, even though we ask about lifetime use, we focus on the 30-day use, the most recent, and then the binge drinking, because that in particular, especially from a prevention and education standpoint, gives us the clue on to what extent are we looking at potential, the problem drinking and the potential for long-term changes. We know that youth who start using by age 15 are 4 to 5 times more likely to have problems with alcohol as an adult. And so the binge drinking is a real concern. But we did see decreases in that also. Okay. Next. Levels of alcohol use, again, talking about, where are we seeing, what are the differences here for experimental, heavy, and problem drinking, and we have those defined with problem drinking being 6+ days of drinking and or 2+ days of binging. Again, the good news here is 90% of the 10th graders are saying that they have not had alcohol in the past 30 days. So we're very pleased with that. And so the focus then is how do we maintain that, and how do we reduce the numbers that are doing, in particular, the problem in the heavy drinking. Next. From the standpoint of the LCB, we obviously want to know where they're getting it, and the numbers for bought it from a store and stole it from a store are still pretty low. Although 12% of 12th graders who are obviously not yet 21 buying it from a store is a concern. The other piece here that I want to focus in on, they're getting it from friends and they're getting it from home with permission. And I think it's a bit astounding that 34% of 8th graders are saying they're getting it from home with permission. Again, this is a flag for us in prevention and education that we need to have more focus on our messaging to parents and caregivers, other adults in their lives. So we're, again, looking at, from the LCB standpoint, the buying and stealing from a store are fairly low, but still there's room for improvement. Okay, next. Perception of risk, and here we look at perception of risk because it often tells us what's the probability of students later using. If perception of risk is low, oftentimes use will increase. So again, 78% saying risky to drink regularly is a good sign for us. 68% it's wrong for kids to drink. That feels pretty high in terms of, we'd like to see them understanding that it's both risky and wrong. And then the police would catch youth who were drinking 30%. And I think some of that, we can think about, in what environment are they doing the drinking? And obviously, if they're doing it at home, then police aren't going to catch them. Next. Here's a concern that we know is high with traffic safety, with Washington State Patrol, all of our law enforcement, and just us as people who are out on the road looking at alcohol, riding, and driving. And when we ask this question, again, we ask about whether they have driven after drinking in the past 30 days or rode with a drinking driver. And, looking at the 12th grade, well, even, 8th, 10th, and 12th, the 10%, 8%, riding with a drinking driver, 4% in 12th grade driving after drinking. We don't know who the driver is. Was it a parent? Was it a friend? Was it a sibling? This is a question that we are considering adding to the Healthy Youth Survey for 2023 to get a better understanding of who's doing the driving, so that any education efforts that we or our partner agencies do can focus on who's doing the driving. Okay, next. So moving on to cannabis use on this, and you'll see marijuana on these slides because that's how the question is asked in the Healthy Youth Survey. So 30-day use, again, we see a pretty substantial decrease here. We're still, when we look at 3% using 7% and 16% of 12th graders, that's still higher than we want to see. Obviously, 0 would be the target, but we're still seeing substantial use. Okay. The level of use, again, like with the alcohol, that the number of days that they've been using in the past 30 days is a concern. When we look at 2% using 10 or more days, and we look at the impact on school success, on brain development, again, level of use this is a pretty high number here for 2%. Next. Type of marijuana used, we put in there asking them to check all that apply. And when we look at this, we're looking at the two areas of concern from a health standpoint: smoking because of the particulate matter in smoking, and dabbing because of the concentration of cannabis. And we know the link to psychosis and other mental health issues. Those numbers being high like that are of real concern. You know, that the concern is that they're using, but even more concern that they're using it in ways that are less healthy than other ways. Right, next. Access, and again, we see from friends as being the highest in this area. They're buying at a store. This one is a little bit puzzling for the 8th and 10th graders to be that high, how they're managing to get that from a store, but from friends is the highest. Other way, we're not sure exactly what they're referring to. They're giving money to someone to get it. And then home with permission is lower than what we saw for alcohol in this area. Okay. Perception of risk. Marijuana is perceived as not harmful. Looking at no or low risk from trying once or twice, and obviously that perception of risk decreases from 8th to 12th grade. That the older they get, the less they have that perception. And then no or low risk from using regularly, which we have find is once or twice a week. So we're talking, 4 or 5 times, or 5 to 10 times per month. All right, next. Then marijuana use with riding and driving. The question, I want to make sure I have this right. So when we asked this on the drove after using, the question is, during the past 30 days, how many times did you drive a car or other vehicle within 3 hours after using marijuana? We've used 3 hours as kind of a gauge. I think this is one of the areas we're looking at for possible changing that number, trying to find out what the best is from research, what the number of days number of hours should be. But on this, we've said within 3 hours after using. And so you're seeing 9%, like almost 1 out of 10 12th graders have said that they've driven after using marijuana. And then again, like alcohol, how many times did they ride in a car or other vehicle driven by someone who had been using? And 15% of 12th graders say that they've ridden, and almost 1 out of 10 on 10th grade, and then 8% on the 8th grade. Again, we don't know who was driving, but looking at asking that question in the future. Okay, next.
All right.
Okay, and I'm turning it back to Tyler here.
Yeah, so I will conclude with covering vapor, e-cigarette use. So similar to the other categories of substance use, we did see substantial decrease, some cases a halving, a drop of 50% among 8th grade, 10th grade, and 12th graders. Just to look at one, we're not going to go into as much detail, but just to look at one aspect of vapor products, what are students vaping? We ask this as a select all question. What type of substance was in the vape pen or whatever you were using? We see that the most commonly checked response among students who reported using was nicotine, followed by THC, so marijuana. Interestingly, a substantial percentage of students who reported using vape pens or e-cigarettes, Juuls, said that the substance wasn't known as well. So that's kind of interesting that not all students seem to have a good idea of what is exactly in that vape pen or that cartridge that they're using, or maybe using someone else's. And then they could have also chosen neither as well, just something that has flavor in it. That's what that looks like. Again, this is grade 10 among sophomores. The last thing I'll mention, when we ask questions on this survey, for example, Mary mentioned we say marijuana instead of cannabis. Here in the question, we ask it as e-cigs, Juul, or vape pens. We do this because not just because we think it's best, but we actually do focus groups with students before each cycle of the survey and ask them, hey, what is the language you all use? What would make the most sense in terms of asking about these topics? Okay, and then to conclude what we're sharing today with polysubstance. So this is just students reported using more than one substance in the past 30 days. We did see substantial decreases, again, across each grade. And here's how that breaks down. Of those who reported using the substance, 7% said single, 4% 2, and then 1% 3. I think that's supposed to be less than 1% for substances. And one more comment on that is among those who do report drinking alcohol, a substantial percent also report using marijuana. So these seem to go pretty hand in hand. If you ask the question the other way among ninth graders, similarly, among the 7% who report using marijuana in the last 30 days, about half of them report also drinking alcohol. So those seem to go hand in hand, and then the smaller percentages say they use some other type of drugs or smoked as well. And then I believe this is our last content slide for today. We ask a lot of additional questions about risk, what we call risk and protective factors, other things that we know influence students' eventual decisions to do different behaviors, including substance use. So at the community level, we ask about their perception of availability in drugs, and 10th grade students responded that, again, about a substantial decrease said that they see drugs as readily available to them in their community. And at the peer individual level of risk factors, we know that peer use is a big factor, and we did see a decrease in reported friends' use of substances as well, going down from 22 to 14% from the last time we asked this question to 2021. So we are seeing some of these risk factors decrease as well, not just the self-reported use. So I think that concludes what we wanted to highlight for you all today. You can certainly email us questions. There's also a general email for suggestions on things like how, changes to the survey type questions. We take feedback through a survey link as well. And we're currently in the process of, I think Mary mentioned with the questions, we're in the process of editing and getting a bunch of feedback and input as we create the survey for the next administration, which will be in fall 2023. So comments are always welcome. We have an ongoing planning committee that we meet at least monthly to work through all of those types of questions. So thanks for your time today.
Great. Thank you. Really appreciate the time that both of you. Jim, do you have questions?
I do have questions, but I think I'm going to hold off because I'm going to actually would love to Mary to follow up and just have a little bit more conversation, and maybe even Tyler set up some time with you just by way of, bringing together my past experience with the Healthy Youth Survey with this new role. So that I'm curious about things that maybe, you guys presented on alcohol, tobacco, and vaping, and I have questions about some other areas, but I don't want to take up space in this forum for that. So no, I think, thank you for the presentation. I thought it was very good. I do have comment actually about at home with permission. And I think that's an interesting area that we have an obligation to find out more about that and perhaps think about ways that we might mitigate that. And so I think that that's an area that I would like to explore further at some point.
Yeah, good point.
Great.
Okay. I just had a couple quick ones, and Mary and I have talked about this a little bit already in general, and I know the why question is tough with sort of most surveys, but this one has its restrictions. But one of the ones was, and I can understand how consumption would go down if people in these age groups were stuck at home more than out on the street and hanging around school and all that. But what would be your guess about why the perception that alcohol and cannabis is risky would go up in that pandemic window here? Any thoughts?
Well, I'll jump in first with kind of what I've thought about, but love to hear what Tyler has to say too. I'm wondering if there has been, because of COVID, more of a health concern overall that youth, when you think about the combination of smoking and lung issues and COVID all mixed together, I'm wondering if youth have gotten more concerned about their health issues. That would be part of it. I'm also wondering what are they seeing at home now? I mean, if parents in the past couple of years, if more parents, more family members are working from home, we have seen consumption of substances go up among adults. And so is there a correlation there? I don't know, but it's one of those things that crosses my mind.
Yeah, I wondered about that too. They're home watching their parents as consumption of cannabis and alcohol went up in 2021.
Tyler, your thoughts?
I don't think I have too much to add other than from the numbers perspective, the perception of risk didn't go up a lot. It did go up, but it wasn't like it went up the same amount that we saw self-reported use went down. So right. It wasn't a huge increase. So I don't know if I have much more to add as to the why. I do think that the one things that Mary mentioned are really good points and possibilities.
And this might be a bigger question than we can handle here, but given the caveats around this, and Mary, when you started and said there's some caveats to 2021, that kind of could be the motto for 2021 across the board. I mean, everything was just odd and strange, so I don't want to draw too many conclusions. But when you look at things like at home with permission, also one of the ones that jumped out was what I thought was the large number of kids who said they didn't even know what they were vaping. What are the things in here that should be drawn out for possible, public information around? Or should we wait for another one before we do too much and draw conclusions on those? I mean, the number of people that said they got cannabis from friends up until the pandemic hit. I did I sat on a board that did juvenile diversion on criminal cases. 99%, that's the answer you get is, oh, I got it from friends. I mean, and that could mean anything, right? I mean, it's from a real friend, it's from a drug dealer, it's from, they stole whatever. That's just kind of a handy thing. And I don't know how you would address that in any sort of public information campaign, but not knowing what you're vaping, with what you're smoking is one. Something for the parents, I don't know, but there were a few of those things that jumped out at me that seemed almost manageable, like you could tackle those issues if we felt confident that they really were not aberrations in the study.
I think in terms of not knowing what they're vaping, this is something that I've heard before too. And I would have to look more closely at this, but the question for me is how well is the labeling on vaping products that indicate what is in there, especially for the flavored products, whether or not they have nicotine in them. And again, as Tyler mentioned, they could be getting it from, somebody hands them a vape pen and they don't know what is in it. But I think I've heard before that youth, the nicotine question is some of it. I just wonder if they're even paying attention. It's vaping, it looks cool, sounds cool, and they'll just start it without knowing what they're getting. They see, oh, here's a strawberry flavor, and they're paying more attention to the flavor than anything else that's in it. So I think that's part of it. I think, we know that parents are the #1 influence on whether or not kids are using these substances, and we need to just keep hammering on those education efforts with parents, and the risks involved. So that, we may not be able to draw conclusions about changes in levels of use, but we still know use is harmful for youth. It's a brain development thing. It's there are so many factors involved that I think we can use the data to help us understand where we need to target efforts and what may be working and what may not be working. But we don't use the data to say, okay, our job is done, because it's not.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just add to that. I think something we could do a lot also, maybe in a way that I've seen done a little bit for kind of a separate but related effort with the young adult health survey. And the messaging that I've seen come out of that is around like doing better with our social norming, right? Because we know that peers are a big influence, but especially using these latest numbers, I mean, the norm is not to be using substances, right? Like most students are not using substances. That is a positive thing. And so I think doing a lot more messaging and education around like, this isn't the cool thing to do. This isn't the normal thing to do, right? Like this is this, this is not the norm. The norm is to be healthy and avoid these substances for the most part. So I would like to see more of our like kind of positive social norms around this as well, especially given these latest numbers. And we do want to, I think, kind of the flip side of that is we don't want to see this bounce back, right? We want to hopefully see this at least stay lower relative to what we've seen in the past. So I think doing all we can to ensure that does not happen.
Yeah, great point. And on the norms, I mean, when you see, what was it, 90% didn't, that seems to me like pretty good news. And whether, I found that whole trend line encouraging. So great. Okay. Those were my questions for now, at least. Anything to add, Mary or Tyler or Jim?
I'll say
No.
We're happy to circle back on this and get into more detail.
Okay, great.
Great.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you both. Really appreciate it. That was interesting.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jim, that's the last item on our agenda other than board member reports. Anything to add today?
Nope. I was out part of last week and just catching up, so I have nothing at this point.
Okay, great. Nor do I. And we will then adjourn the board caucus meeting for May 31st, 2022. And we will be back next week. Have a great day. See you, Jim.
Bye.